A broke young mother, a long flight, a familiar voice she hadn't heard in years. When she turned and saw who was sitting beside her, her world tilted, because the man she thought was gone forever was suddenly back, inches from her son. Claire Evans boarded the red-eye flight with trembling hands and a 2-year-old boy asleep on her shoulder. The terminal lights had long since dimmed, and the chill of fatigue sank deep into her bones. She hadn't eaten a full meal in over a day, and the last few coins in her purse had gone to a juice box and a small snack for Noah. Now, with her son nestled against her chest in a thrift store hoodie, far too thin for the plane's air conditioning, she shuffled slowly down the narrow aisle, searching for their assigned seat. She didn't have enough for 2 tickets, so she had booked only one, an aisle seat in the very back. But when she reached it, an elderly man in the next seat over glanced unkindly at the baby, muttered something about brats on flights, and shoved his bag under the seat with a huff. Claire stood frozen, unsure, her eyes stinging. "Ma'am?" a stewardess asked gently behind her. Claire turned and whispered, Could I please take an empty row if there's one?" The stewardess checked quickly. "We're nearly full, but there is one spare seat by the window. Row 9C. Claire nodded and thanked her, making her way forward as carefully as possible. She found the seat near the wing 9C and saw that only one man sat there already, in 9A. He was dressed sharply, though casually. Dark jeans, a tailored jacket, and leather shoes that looked expensive without trying. He was absorbed in something on his phone, barely glancing up. "Excuse me," Claire said softly, shifting Noah's weight in her arms. "Would it be all right if I sat here? They said it was free." The man finally looked up. His eyes flicked from Claire to the sleeping child, and for a moment, something flickered in his gaze. Then he nodded once and moved his briefcase from the middle seat. "Of course," he said, his voice calm, slightly gravelly. "Thank you," she murmured. She settled in, Noah still sleeping on her chest, and wrapped a small worn blanket over him. The man didn't speak further. Claire dared a quick glance. He looked familiar, something about the jawline, the curve of his mouth. But it had been years. Faces changed. She dismissed it as coincidence. As the plane began to taxi, Claire felt exhaustion crashing into her. Noah stirred briefly but didn't cry. She rocked him gently, murmuring nonsense against his hair. The hum of the engine soothed her. Her head tilted back against the headrest. Then slowly, as the plane lifted into the sky, her eyes closed, and without even realizing it, she leaned sideways, until her head rested lightly on the stranger's shoulder. He didn't move. He sat very still, his phone now locked in his hand, his gaze fixed forward. And somewhere beneath the layers of his calm exterior, a memory stirred. Something about the girl's scent, the warmth of her weight against him. Familiar, intimate, almost painful. But neither of them said a word. They simply flew forward through the dark, hearts unknowingly circling something neither of them were ready to face. Not yet. Claire woke to the sound of a voice. Not loud, but close. Deep, smooth, and unmistakably familiar. Her eyelids fluttered open, and for a moment she didn't remember where she was. The vibration of the airplane, the faint click of overhead vents, and the rhythmic hum of engines brought it all back in a slow wave. Noah was still asleep in her arms, his small hand curled against her chest. Her head was resting, she froze on someone's shoulder. She lifted it slightly, her face flushing with embarrassment, ready to apologize. But then she heard the voice again. The man beside her was speaking quietly into his phone. His tone was serious, deliberate. Claire couldn't help but listen. "Yeah, the Tokyo meeting's moved. I'll be there Friday. I'm heading straight to New York after this." A pause. "Yes, I've already confirmed the transfer with Marcus." Claire blinked. The name, the tone, the clipped efficiency of the words, they scraped at something raw and buried inside her. Then he said a name that made her chest cave in. "No, I haven't found Claire. I told you. After what happened, she probably changed her name. Disappeared. If I had even a way to trace her, I would have. I never stopped looking." Claire's heart stopped. She stared ahead, her breath caught in her throat. That voice, that name. The man she'd spent the last 2 years mourning, cursing, praying for, was sitting beside her. Ethan. She could barely think. Her fingers trembled as she pulled the blanket higher around Noah, as if shielding him from something invisible. Her eyes darted toward him. The man she had loved so deeply it had left a permanent ache in her, was right there. He hadn't changed beyond recognition. His jaw was sharper now, hair slightly longer, eyes older. But it was him. He ended the call and exhaled slowly, leaning his head back against the seat. Claire turned her face away quickly, terrified he might glance over and see her. But he didn't. She couldn't make sense of what was happening. Ethan had vanished without a trace when she was still pregnant. The trauma of his brother's death, the pressure from his powerful family, the breakdown that followed, it had all swallowed him whole. She'd tried to contact him, waited through weeks, then months until she had no choice but to move on. He never answered, and now he was here, sitting next to her, and he was still looking for her. She wanted to speak, wanted to scream, wanted to wake him, slap him, cry into his chest, or demand why he had let her go through everything alone. But she did none of that, because now, with her son breathing softly against her, she realized something terrifying. He didn't recognize her. And Claire wasn't even sure what hurt more, his absence all these years, or the fact that the man who once promised her forever could sit inches away and not know her at all. Claire sat frozen, her heart pounding louder than the roar of the engines outside. Her mind was racing, caught in 1,000 tangled thoughts. Ethan Miller, the man who once kissed every inch of her world into light, who whispered promises into her skin, who vanished without a single goodbye, was inches from her, unaware that the woman beside him was the one he had once sworn he'd never leave. She glanced down at Noah. He stirred slightly, curling closer into her chest. The familiar weight of him grounded her. He was the only reason she had kept going. He was her anchor. But now she could feel the past trying to rip that anchor loose. Ethan pulled out a folder from his leather bag and opened it across the tray table. Claire glanced sideways, cautiously, watching his face. His expression was serious, focused. She noticed a small scar near his temple, one that hadn't been there before. She wanted to reach out, to ask about it, but her voice wouldn't come. Instead, she listened as he took another call, this one brief, softer. "Yeah, I'm on the flight. It's been a long week," he murmured. I don't know, I had this feeling, like something was about to shift." A pause. "No, nothing new on her. No leads. But I still think about her every day. That hasn't changed." Claire's throat tightened. She squeezed her eyes shut, willing herself not to cry. How was it possible to feel both seen and invisible at the same time? Ethan ended the call and sat in silence. Claire pretended to sleep, eyes closed, her face turned toward the window. Her hands trembled as she adjusted Noah's blanket again. The motion must have stirred him, because Noah let out a soft, sleepy sound, then looked up, blinking his wide hazel eyes. Ethan's eyes shifted to the boy instinctively. Claire felt it, the sudden stillness in his body, the pause in his breath. He studied the toddler, his gaze lingering on Noah's face. Noah blinked back, and in a quiet voice mumbled, "Mama." Claire kissed his forehead gently. "Shh, baby. We're still on the plane." Ethan turned away then, but not before Claire saw the subtle crease in his brow. Something had stirred. Recognition? A question? A memory? Claire didn't know how to prepare herself for what would happen when he finally realized who she was. But she knew one thing. She couldn't run. Not now. She had already spent too many nights wondering where he'd gone, crying herself to sleep with a baby pressed against her chest. She wouldn't let this moment pass in silence. Not again. The captain announced their descent, and the flight attendants began moving through the cabin. Claire's stomach twisted. Every minute that passed brought her closer to a decision she wasn't ready to make. Beside her, Ethan shut the folder, tucked it away, and leaned back. He glanced at Noah again. Then his eyes slowly moved to her face. She didn't look away this time. For one suspended breath, they looked at each other. And in that breath, everything shifted. There it was, the flicker, the crack in his mask. "Claire," he said, barely audible. Her lips parted. "Yes," she whispered. And the world tilted. Ethan stared at her like he was seeing a ghost. His lips parted slightly, but no sound came. His eyes were wide, searching, desperate, as if they were trying to pull together the fragments of a memory that had never quite left him. Claire felt everything inside her tighten. Her throat closed, her chest ached. Her hands instinctively pulled Noah closer. She wasn't sure if it was fear, grief, or sheer disbelief crashing over her, but whatever it was suffocating. Claire, Ethan said again, this time louder, more certain. It's really you? She gave a small nod, but her voice trembled when she tried to answer. Yes, it's me. He blinked rapidly, his mouth opening, closing, failing to form coherent words. I thought you were gone. I tried to find you. After everything that happened, I didn't know where you went. I thought maybe you didn't want to be found. Claire swallowed the bitterness that rose in her throat. You disappeared, Ethan. I waited, I called, I emailed. Nothing. You vanished. The pain in her voice hit him like a slap, and he leaned back, stunned. I was sick, Claire. I wasn't thinking straight. After Daniel died and everything with my dad, I broke. I went somewhere private. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. I didn't want to hurt you with who I had become. Claire closed her eyes. And you thought abandoning me, abandoning your child was safer? The words hung heavy between them. Noah shifted, sensing the tension. He looked up at Ethan and said, Hi. It was small, sweet, completely innocent. Ethan's face crumpled. He looked at the boy as if he were seeing the sun for the first time. Is he? Claire nodded. Yes, his name is Noah. He's 2, and he's yours. Ethan's hand went to his mouth as if to muffle the sound that came out, a half-broken sob. Oh my God! He looked like he was about to fall apart. Claire didn't soften. She couldn't. Not yet. I raised him alone. I've been alone for 2 years, Ethan. He nodded, eyes glassy. I deserved that. I deserved worse. I failed you. I failed him. But Claire, I never stopped thinking about you. I thought about you every single day. I went back to the hospital, to your apartment. Your number had changed. No one would tell me where you were. I even hired someone. But you vanished. Claire looked down. I had no one. My aunt died. I didn't want your money or your family involved. I thought, maybe you just left, like everyone else. I didn't, he said firmly. I was broken, but I didn't stop loving you. I didn't stop looking. And now, God, you're here. The plane jolted gently as it landed on the runway. The wheels screeched, and for a moment, the noise covered the silence between them. As the plane taxied to the gate, neither of them moved. They just sat there, suspended in a reality too surreal to grasp. I don't know what you want from me now, Claire said quietly. I don't know if I want anything from you. Ethan looked down at Noah, who had begun playing with a small stuffed bear in Claire's bag. Then he looked at her, pain and awe mixing in his eyes. I just want a chance to be his father, to earn your forgiveness. I don't expect you to give me anything, Claire, but please, let me try. Claire didn't answer. The seatbelt sign turned off. She stood, lifting Noah carefully, and stepped into the aisle. Then she turned back to Ethan. We're staying at the Haven Motel, room 213. And then she walked away, not with anger, not with fear, but with the heavy strength of a mother who had carried too much alone, and maybe, just maybe, was ready to stop. The motel room was dimly lit, the floral curtains drawn against the morning sun, and Claire sat in the armchair by the window watching. Noah pushed his toy truck across the worn carpet. She hadn't slept more than 2 hours, not with everything spinning through her head like a carousel she couldn't get off. She'd said the words, given Ethan the address, but now that she was here, waiting, she didn't know what she expected. Would he come? Should she have told him? Was it a mistake? Noah let out a giggle as his truck toppled and rolled under the bed. Claire reached down to retrieve it, and the moment she sat back up, there was a knock at the door. Her heart jumped. She hesitated, then stood slowly and walked to the door. She peeked through the peephole. It was him. Ethan stood outside wearing jeans and a simple gray hoodie. Not the polished CEO from the plane, but something quieter, more real. His hands were in his pockets, and his posture was uncertain, like he wasn't sure he deserved to be on the other side of the door. Claire opened it. Hi, he said. She stepped aside wordlessly to let him in. Noah looked up, then blinked at the tall man entering the room. He didn't smile, but he didn't cry either. He just watched. Ethan crouched slightly, looking at the boy. "Hi, Noah," he said softly. Noah held his bear closer and stared at him, thoughtful. Claire remained silent, watching everything. I, Ethan cleared his throat, standing again. I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about the look in your eyes when you said my name, like I'd broken something. And I did. I know that. Claire crossed her arms. Why did you really disappear? He looked away, jaw tightening. After Daniel died, I had a breakdown. My father forced me into this image of who I was supposed to be. I started drinking. I couldn't breathe under the pressure. When I found out you were pregnant, I panicked. Not because I didn't want the baby, but because I thought I would ruin you both. I was already ruining myself. Claire's face softened slightly but remained guarded. So you ran. I left, he admitted. I thought I needed to heal alone, but all I did was hide. I told myself I'd come back when I was better. But by the time I had the strength to look for you, you were gone, and I thought I deserved that. She sat on the edge of the bed. You did. Ethan nodded. I'm not asking you to forget, Claire. I'm asking you to see me now. Noah wandered over and reached for Claire's hand. She picked him up, setting him on her lap. Ethan looked at them, pain in his eyes. I've missed everything, he whispered. His first words, his first steps, everything. I don't want to miss anymore. Claire studied his face. He wasn't faking the grief, the guilt, and somewhere in his voice was something she hadn't expected. Humility. You want to be a father? She asked. I do. Whatever that means to you. I'll start small. Be patient. I don't need to be in your life the way I once was, but I want to be in his. Claire held Noah closer. He's cautious and smart. He'll know if you're lying. Then I won't lie, Ethan said firmly. A long silence passed between them. Finally, Claire nodded toward the chair by the window. Then sit down. Get to know your son. Ethan's expression cracked with emotion, and he quietly walked over and took the seat. Noah eyed him warily, then held out the toy truck. Ethan smiled. It was the smallest gesture, but it was a beginning. Next few days unfolded like cautious steps across thin ice. Every moment between Claire and Ethan was filled with a fragile tension, uncertainty laced with something else, something familiar, but buried under years of silence and pain. Ethan came back to the motel every morning. He never showed up empty-handed. Sometimes it was fresh fruit, sometimes a small toy for Noah, and once it was coffee and the blueberry muffin Claire used to crave during her pregnancy. He never pushed. He waited for Claire to open the door, waited for Noah to reach out, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the walls began to crack. That Thursday morning, Claire found herself staring at Ethan as he crouched beside Noah, helping him stack a flimsy tower of plastic cups. Noah's tiny fingers fumbled and knocked one over, and Ethan let out a theatrical gasp that made the boy giggle. Claire smiled before she realized she was doing it. Ethan looked up and caught her watching. There was a moment, a small, charged pause, before she looked away. Later that day, they took Noah to a nearby park. Claire hadn't been there since she'd moved to the motel. She was afraid of the looks, the questions, the loneliness that came with sitting on benches surrounded by families. But now she wasn't alone. Noah ran toward the slide, squealing. Ethan followed him, not too close, giving the boy space but never letting him out of sight. Claire sat on a bench beneath the shade of a tree and took a breath that felt deeper than anything in weeks. When Ethan returned, he held 2 iced coffees. He handed her one without a word and sat beside her. They watched Noah together for a few minutes in silence. Then Claire spoke. What was the worst part? She asked, eyes still on her son. Ethan didn't ask what she meant. He knew. Waking up in the middle of the night, he said quietly, thinking I heard your voice, and then remembering I was alone. Claire didn't speak. Ethan continued. The guilt, the silence, the way my chest hurt every time I saw a child with dark eyes and wondered if he might be mine. She looked at him then. Why didn't you write? Leave something. Anything. I was ashamed and afraid. I told myself you were better off without me, but I hated myself for believing it. They were quiet again. Then she said, I don't forgive you. Not yet. Ethan nodded. That's fair. But I see how you look at him, she added, and I believe you're trying. He turned to her, his voice thick. He's incredible, Claire, and that's because of you. She felt her throat tighten. She hated how much that meant to hear. You missed a lot, she said. I know, but if you'll let me, Ethan whispered, I'll spend the rest of my life catching up. Claire didn't answer, but she didn't move away either. When Noah came running toward them, arms outstretched and full of dandelions, he handed them equally, half to Claire, half to Ethan. And for the first time, they looked like a family again. Not perfect, not healed, but real. The rain came unexpectedly that Saturday afternoon. Claire and Ethan had taken Noah to a small local bookstore cafe, one of those cozy places with creaky wooden floors and the smell of cinnamon drifting from behind the counter. Claire liked it because no one judged her there. The woman at the register knew her by name and always gave Noah a free cookie. It had become their little haven. They were seated by the window, Noah flipping through a colorful board book, legs swinging beneath the table. Ethan sat across from Claire, his hands wrapped around a warm mug. She watched the way he looked at their son now, not just with awe, but with a quiet hunger, like he was trying to memorize every blink, every smile. Claire stirred her tea slowly. He's calmer with you, she said softly. Ethan looked up, surprised. Really, she nodded. He used to flinch when new people got too close. But with you, I don't know, he just knew. Ethan's voice was low. I still don't know how to be a dad, Claire. Not the right way. There is no right way, she said. But you're here. That's more than I ever thought he'd have. He was about to answer when a sudden flash of lightning lit up the window, followed by a loud crack of thunder. The sky opened up seconds later, rain pounding against the glass like applause. Noah startled. Scared, he mumbled, reaching for Claire. Before she could move, Ethan gently scooped Noah up and pulled him into his lap. Hey, buddy, it's just the sky making noise. Nothing's gonna hurt you, I promise. Claire watched as Noah buried his face in Ethan's chest and calmed, slowly, trustingly. Something shifted in her chest, something she'd kept buried for 2 years. It wasn't just longing or pain, it was hope. After the storm passed and the coffee cups were empty, they walked back to the motel in silence, sharing the same umbrella. Claire held Noah fast asleep now, his head against her shoulder. Ethan carried her worn diaper bag. When they reached her door, Claire hesitated before unlocking it. She turned to Ethan. Do you want to come in? She asked. He hesitated. I don't want to push. You're not, she said quietly. You've been patient. You've shown up. That matters. Inside, she laid Noah gently on the bed and covered him with a small quilt. Ethan stood near the dresser, unsure of his place. Claire pulled off her jacket and turned to face him. You said you were broken when you left, she said. So was I. I just didn't have the luxury to fall apart. Ethan stepped forward slowly. Let me help now. Let me be someone who lifts the weight, not adds to it. Claire didn't answer right away. Her eyes searched his face for lies, but all she saw was sincerity and regret. You were the love of my life, she said. And then the biggest heartbreak. His voice broke. I never stopped loving you, Claire. I just stopped believing I deserved to. She took a breath. I don't know where this goes, but if we're going to try, you can't disappear again. I won't, he said immediately. She nodded. Then to his surprise, she stepped forward and rested her forehead against his shoulder. He froze, then slowly wrapped his arms around her, like someone holding something sacred. They didn't speak. They just stood there in the quiet, broken pieces between them, starting to find their way back together. 6 months later, Claire stood barefoot in the kitchen of a small but bright apartment, flipping pancakes on a Sunday morning. Sunlight poured through the open balcony doors, and the sound of a child's laughter echoed from the living room. The smell of maple syrup, warm butter, and fresh coffee filled the air. It was quiet, ordinary, and somehow everything she had once thought she'd never have. She glanced over her shoulder just in time to see Ethan lift Noah onto his shoulders. The boy squealed with joy, gripping his father's head like a tiny rider on a wild horse. Ethan laughed, spinning them both in a slow circle. The sight pulled a smile from her lips that she hadn't realized she was holding back. 6 months ago, they were strangers with shared ghosts. Now they were rebuilding, slowly, deliberately, with more truth than promises. When breakfast was ready, Claire set the plates on the table, and Ethan placed Noah in his booster seat. Claire slid into the chair across from them. She looked at the two of them, her son with syrup on his chin, and Ethan smiling in that quiet way he did now, as if every moment was something to be grateful for. After they ate, Claire took Noah outside for a walk while Ethan cleaned up. She returned to find a small envelope on her pillow, her name written in Ethan's handwriting. Her heart skipped. Inside was a folded sheet of paper. Not a letter, but a list. A quiet, vulnerable list titled, "Things I Promise." To never disappear again. To always show up. To be the kind of father Noah never has to question. To give you time, even when I want to rush. To never let a day pass where you wonder if you're alone. To hold your history with respect and your heart with care. To learn from my silence. To love you honestly. Not perfectly, but fully. Claire pressed the paper to her chest and exhaled. Her walls, though cracked and weathered, had never fully crumbled. But this was different. This was a man who had been shattered and rebuilt. This was someone who had once left and chosen to return with both hands open. That evening, the three of them curled up on the couch together, watching an old animated movie. Noah fell asleep in Ethan's arms, one thumb in his mouth, the other hand gripping his stuffed bear. Claire turned off the lamp, leaving only the soft glow of the television. She shifted closer, resting her head on Ethan's shoulder, just like she had that night on the plane, only now without fear, without confusion. "You still think something shifted?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "The moment you said my name, everything changed." Claire smiled against his chest. "We're not the same people we were." "No," he said. "We're better." And as the rain tapped gently on the windows and their child breathed steadily between them, Claire allowed herself to believe in the strange, beautiful truth of second chances. Not the ones handed to you, but the ones you fight for, the ones that begin with heartbreak and end with coming home. From an author's perspective, the ending of this story offers a rare and meaningful kind of hope. Not the perfect fairy tale kind, but the earned kind. The kind that grows out of brokenness, silence, and time. It's about two people who were torn apart by trauma, fear, and choices they couldn't undo. Yet they chose to meet again, not as who they once were, but as who they had become. What makes the ending powerful isn't just the reunion, it's the restraint, the slow trust, the way Ethan doesn't beg for forgiveness, but commits to earning it. And Claire, instead of surrendering blindly, allows him space to prove he's not the man who left. It's raw, it's fragile, but it's real. In a world where people so often walk away from complicated things, this story dares to say, healing is possible. Not instantly, not easily, but through presence, accountability, and love that stays. That's the kind of ending that lingers.